Okay. I think that is recording.
Yeah, it's recording, Siobhan. I can see it here.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's take a look at our agenda for this morning's session. So this is the first in a series of workshops to support this additional call for strategic partnerships. And this session will be focusing on the content development aspect of the application. There will be other sessions which I'll explain later in this presentation. So we expect the session to last approximately 1.5 to 2 hours. There will be a short comfort break in between as well. So Dee is going to warm up the session by finding out a bit more information as to who is in the workshop today. And then I am going to explain a bit about the call, including some key information that you'll need to know before you start your application. And then we're going to move on to the background to the call, as well as providing more details on the 2 priorities for this call. We'll then give an overview of strategic partnerships, types of projects and activities for those of you that might be new to strategic partnerships. And then the next session will focus on the first quality criteria of relevance, which is an extremely important quality criteria. And we'll look at how to evidence the needs of your project. And lastly, we're going to go through some suggestions on how to put your application together in the project design section. So I'm now going to hand over to Dee for the introductions and warm-up.
Okay, morning guys, how are you all? So guys, if we all can go to, I'm sure you're very used to this as well, go to menta.com and you can see the use code there 69890. If you all go in there, there's 7 questions that we're going to ask you to answer. Very short answers, 1 word in most cases, if that's okay, guys. Are most people in that okay, guys? It can be a bit slow.
Yeah, it's working here, Dee.
Great.
Just a 1 question popped. Is it only just the 1?
No, the 7 questions. We're just going to move to it now so we can accept each question. So if we can move on to that, Siobhan, I think.
Hi, Karen.
Hi.
Karen.
Good to see you.
Okay, so.
Great. So I said there's 7 short questions. It gives an idea of where you're coming from and what type of strategic partnership you're thinking about applying for. So how are we all feeling today? 1 short word is plenty. So many people, it can take a bit longer, guys, if that's okay. Okay, I can see we're nearly there with answers. Okay, Siobhan, I think we'll move on to see who's responded to that one. Okay. No? Okay. Geographically, where are you? So where are you located? Be it in Ireland, Dublin, or wherever? Where are you coming from?
Okay.
In my office, nice geographical spread there. Anyone else? I like the answer, in a good place. I see we have some friends from Europe, which is also good to see. Turkey, in my office, okay.
In a show, lucky person.
I'm just looking at that, yeah. Okay, guys, a very good spread, which is always great to see. It's lovely to see some European friends here. I don't know if you're attending this because you're going to be a partner of a project in Ireland who's going to submit the application or not, but welcome. If you are actually, in fact, going to be the coordinator, I would strongly suggest after this session, do get in touch with your own national agency. I like that, Galway, but now Italy. Okay, so we can move on to the next question. Just want to get a feeling of people's experience of European projects over the years. Okay.
Really big spread.
Really big spread, really good, okay. Since the 90s, okay. Okay, so some very experienced people here, guys, and then some complete newbies, which is always great to see. Okay, Siobhan, we can move on. So basically, how would you describe your understanding of K2 strategic partnerships? And there's 4 options there you have. It's always great to see the way the colours bounce up and who's winning the race as such. Okay, so again, there's some very experienced people as coordinators of KA2. There's some there involved as a partner as well, which have a good idea, have some knowledge, but not yet got involved and very little knowledge. Okay, it's good just to see the balance today. That's great. So again, and we will talk about strategic partnerships later on, but you're probably aware there are 2 types you can apply for: development of innovation or exchange of practice. So we kind of want to see, if you know at this stage, what you are hoping to apply for. Okay, so the vast majority here of development of innovation, 1 maybe exchange of practice, and a few I don't know. Let's hope after the session you have a clearer understanding. Okay. So, as you know, the application form is already out and available. We just want to see where you are with the application form. And as Siobhan has already said, she will give you information on supports post this event today. Okay, so again, you've started, a number of people have started, need some guidance. We always get that one in the middle of OMG, but that is what we're here to support you through the process. And again, a number of people haven't opened the application forms, absolutely no problem. Great, okay. And just finally, just so we all know what we're here to do, what do you hope to have answered in the session today? Okay, well, just answer the first one, what to do. Yes, we will definitely tell you what you can and can't do. We'll definitely cover the next steps. Familiar with the themes, yes. Good overview, definitely you'll get that. Clarity, how to approach things. Expected outputs. Okay, great.
There's some expecting examples as well. So that's something that we'll cover in the thematic webinars following this one.
Yeah.
We'll actually go into the themes and we'll have examples of projects that have done K2s through the particular themes.
Yeah, so exactly. So all of those might not be answered in this particular session.
Exactly.
Across the sessions.
Yeah. Well, I said Siobhan will go through those sessions afterwards. Okay, guys, look, that's great. Thanks a million. It's just good to kind of see where we all are in relation to this and our understanding.
Okay, so back to presentation. Okay, so I'm just going to provide a little bit of background information now about the call, some key information that you need before you begin your application, but also to introduce the different fields you can apply under. So who can apply? Well, basically, Strategic Partnerships is open to any public or private organisation established in a programme country. And I'm going to go through the programme countries in a little minute. So basically, any organisation can participate as well, and from any programme country, and also from any partner country of the world, but only if they bring essential added value. And again, I'll speak about that in more detail in a few minutes. You must have a minimum of 3 organizations from 3 different program countries. That's an eligibility kind of basic criteria. So that means that as a coordinator, you will need a minimum of 2 other partners from 2 different program countries. For this particular call, partnerships in the fields of education and training will have to last between 12 months and 24 months. And those in the field of youth between 6 months and 24 months. And again, we'll cover the fields in a while as well. And the deadline is going to be the 29th of October 2020 at 11 AM Irish time. And the projects are expected to start between the 1st of March and the 30th of June 2021. So I've talked about the duration according to the fields earlier. The fields that are covered in this particular call, which is broken down into 2 different themes: digital readiness, which is open to schools, vocational training and higher education. But just to note that the higher education aspect of Erasmus Plus is managed by the Higher Education Authority in Ireland. So further information for the higher education strand can be obtained from them. We are going to cover schools, VET, and also we're going to cover the creativity theme, which is open to schools, adult education and youth. And also to note that projects can also be cross-sectoral. So as promised, that's the list of programme countries. Most of them you'll be familiar with in terms of they're the members of the European Union, and then a few additional countries, non-EU, but they are programme countries and entitled to be full participants of the programme. That's the Republic of North Macedonia, Iceland, Liechtenstein, Norway, Turkey and Serbia. And just to note as well that the UK is entitled to participate as a full partner country until the end of this current Erasmus Plus programme. So they are eligible to participate in this additional call. So I mentioned that also as a partner, you can have a partner country from anywhere in the world, but just be aware that they can only participate where there's a genuine added value with specific experience or expertise brought in that is essential for your project's success. And notably, which is not able to be found in Erasmus Plus programme countries. So they have to bring skills and experience, which you would not ordinarily be able to find within the programme countries that are able to participate as full programme countries. So they might have expertise in a certain aspect of the project that is really unique to their part of the world and can add value and bring in genuine added value to the Erasmus Plus programme countries. And I mentioned that you can also have cross-sectoral partnerships, and just to note that there's no separate application form for those. You just apply, still have to apply under a main field. So you have to choose which is your main field applicable under the call, and then you would apply. But that means also that you can have, you can have involved partners from other fields, but you still have to be focused on one main field and focused on the priorities under that field. And there's also no specific location in the application form for a project to identify themselves as a cross-sectoral partnership, but you can specifically state that in the narrative, or it may be clear from the priority and how you address that priority. So I mentioned the different fields. So there are 4 fields that I'm going to cover, and they're all relevant to this particular call, but not necessarily to both of the priorities. So I will be covering that as well in reminding you of which fields are relevant to which priorities as we go through. So the adult education field, just to be aware that adult education is a distinct feature of the Education Training Consortium within Erasmus+, and it's placed to address challenges faced by adults experiencing educational inequality, for example, through outreach or guidance, and it also addresses areas such as basic skills for adults, such as literacy, numeracy, and digital, and also to build wider skills, addressing broader societal purpose of education. So just be aware though that the, and also very important, which is relevant to the Partnerships for Creativity, is addressing marginalisation, social exclusion experienced by adults. And just be aware that adult education, if you want to apply for adult education, it's only open to Partnerships for Creativity in this particular. And the indicative budget that we have, the amount of money that we have available for this call for adult education is €465,000. I don't know if you want to add anything there, Denise, or you'll probably cover in the creativity section. Okay, so vocational education and training is also a field relevant under this call. And just be aware, for if you want to apply under vocational education and training, that it is quite a broad field, but it's specifically about equipping people with the knowledge, know-how and skills and/or competencies in particular occupations, or more broadly on the labour market. So it doesn't break into 2 strands, but you should be aware that it covers 2 aspects of vocational training. Initial vocational training, which is the training carried out in initial education system, usually before entering working life. In Ireland, this comes under further education. It also covers continuing vocational education and training, which is education training after initial education and training, so or after entry into working life. So, for example, improving or updating skills or knowledge, acquiring new skills for a career, or continuing personal or professional development in the workplace. So the indicative budget for the vocational education strand for this call is 381,000, and that applies to Partnerships for Digital Readiness only. So you can only apply for the digital readiness strand under vocational education and training field. For school education, and this covers all areas of school education from preschool to upper secondary, and it allows schools to cooperate with each other, but particularly with outside organisations in this particular call, focusing on issues such, in generally it focuses on issues such as school education and citizenship. But in this particular call, the budget assigned to it is 892,000, but be aware that the school education is applicable under both priorities of Partnerships for Digital Readiness and Partnerships for Creativity. So that budget will be split between those 2 different priorities for this call. And finally, youth. The strategic partnerships between youth organisations allow youth organisations or external organisations to cooperate and run innovation projects and also exchange practice projects. And the budget for the youth field in this call, which applies to Partnerships for Creativity only, is approximately 673,000. So hopefully that gives you an idea of the fields that you can apply under, and also the amounts of funding that are available under those fields. And as I said, you just need to be aware that only certain fields can apply for specific, those 2 specific priorities, either digital or creativity, apart from the schools fields, where you can apply for either priority. And we'll go into more details on the priorities shortly. So as I mentioned earlier, this isn't the only workshop that's going to support this call. There are a number of other workshops planned. We have some thematic workshops on each of the two main priorities. That's digital education and creativity for change. We're running those under our webinar Wednesday. Webinars that we've been running each Wednesday for the last number of months. So just you can apply to, you can register to attend those on our website as you did for this particular workshop. And we also are going to have a budget and finance workshop, and that workshop will also take you through the application form, and that's going to be on the 12th of October. And then we're also offering an open house, which will provide support on an individual basis for completing your application, and that's going to run on the 22nd of October. So lots of support workshops coming up, and you can find out more and register for all of those on that link. And obviously you'll receive a copy of this presentation after the workshop, so you'll be able to access those links. So just before we move on to look at the background to the call, just to point out that this is an additional call, so funding is limited, and on average, with the exception of the youth call for creativity, there is only funding available for an average of 1 to 2 projects per field. So therefore, it is likely to be a very competitive process, so please bear that in mind when you start your application. It also means that in order to be considered for funding, your project will need to align very closely with the thematic priorities. Therefore, the next section that Denise is going to introduce is extremely important. And also, if the amount of funding available, as I said, it is going to be very competitive, but just be aware that this is only an additional call, and there is going to be a new call early in 2021 for the new Erasmus Plus program. And obviously that's going to be a much wider, much broader budget available across the different fields. Okay, so I'm going to move on now to hand over to Denise, and she's going to go through the policy and priorities background to the call.
Thanks, Siobhan. Okay, so if you just move to the next slide there, Siobhan. Thanks a million. Yeah, so this is a special call that was announced in August, and it's part of a range of measures from the European Commission to address the COVID-19 pandemic. So the measures that they announced from the time of lockdown over into the summer covered things like the economy and the agri sector and the environment and health. And this is the educational initiative around the pandemic. And this has led to a revision of the Erasmus Plus 2020 programme with additional call in it, and providing 100 million for across Europe to address these challenges in terms of specifically digital education readiness and partnerships for creativity. So the call for digital education readiness will support specific projects in school education, vocational education and training, and higher education. And it's to enhance online distance and blended learning, and supporting teachers and trainers in the transition here to blended learning, and also safeguarding the inclusive nature of digital learning opportunities. And the call for partnerships for creativity will support projects in the fields of youth, school education and adult education. So just note there that school education is for both of the themes, but it's for adult education only for creativity and youth here. And the call aims to develop skills and competencies that encourage creativity and boost quality, innovation and recognition of youth work. And you'll recognise a lot of in the language that it's very similar to the Erasmus Plus priorities more broadly, with kind of a clearer emphasis on digital education and creativity here. So in terms then of the partnerships for digital readiness, the projects that they want to see coming in are aiming to equip education and training systems to respond to the challenges faced by the shift to online and distance learning, and to support teachers and organisations in developing their digital competencies and safeguarding inclusive nature of learning opportunities for learners. And the goal is to reinforce the ability of the training institutions across the fields to respond to this, providing high quality and inclusive digital education. And it's about building capacity to implement this online, the blended and distance approach, to develop digital pedagogical competencies of educators and enabling them to deliver high quality inclusive education, or to develop high quality content, such as innovative online resources and tools. And again, it's about promoting the networking across institutions in the EU, the sharing of resources and expertise, and the collaboration with digital technology providers and experts in educational technologies with relevant pedagogical practice to develop tailor-made solutions adapted to local challenges and realities. So then in response to this, it is asked for particularly relevant activities to happen through the strategic partnership on the theme of digital readiness to implement the following activities, and these are non-exhaustive. So I suppose our advice to you is to just read the call carefully and see you know, what aspect of the call really speaks to your project. So whether it's digital readiness or creativity. So here it's asking for activities that deploy digital tools and methods to deliver quality and inclusive education through online virtual means, including blended teaching, training and learning. Activities that support learners, teachers and trainers in adapting online. Activities to teach and promote safer and more responsible use of digital technology. And activities to understand how best to incorporate digital online technology into subject-specific training, teaching and learning, including work-based learning. So your project may have elements of all of these, or it might be very clearly focused in a particular area. It's just really to read it carefully and just to see what most resonates with the emphasis of your project. So obviously there's always a background in terms of the policy picture at an EU level. This is in the European Digital Competence Framework is something that we recommend that you take a look at. It's informed by the European Digital Action Plan, and it's communicating around digital competencies for citizens, for educators, on recommendations towards policy reform, and on how organisations can be digitally competent. And there's also a specific link there that we've given you to all of these if you want to take further reading on it. And also there's also a more recent resource with coronavirus online learning resources. So the European Commission has pulled together online learning platforms, European ones, and also linked to projects that have developed digital resources.
Yeah, just to add on the digital, on the digital readiness, we would really expect any project applying to incorporate some aspect of the digital competence framework into their project for the specific call. So that really needs to be an element of any project that's applying.
Okay. So then the partnerships or the call for creativity is for the fields of youth, school education and adult education, and it's engaging organisations in the fields of the formal, informal and non-formal education and youth, together with those in the creative and cultural sectors. And it's looking to reinforce cross-sectoral cooperation and sharing with a focus on creativity, European citizenship and cultural awareness of all citizens, enhancing social inclusion through the arts by fostering innovative and participatory intercultural dialogue, linking education, training and youth with the cultural and creative sectors, grassroots organisations. So it's looking to see that sharing happening between the fields of the education, training and youth and the cultural and creative sectors. It's aiming to equip young people and adults with the necessary tools and competencies that need to come up with creative and innovative solutions to the current challenge and recognise opportunities in this current environment. And it aims to enhance skills development and competencies that reinforce creativity, as well as boost quality, innovation and recognition of youth work that support the creative potential of youth, thus contributing to the recovery resilience of the cultural and creative sectors. So again, there's they've given a more kind of specific outline of the kind of activities they'd like to see in strategic partnerships. So they're looking for reinforcing all aspects of creativity in non-formal and formal education by enhancing development of skills and competencies, and measures to accelerate digital transformation and use of digital in how we consume, create and disseminate cultural activities and goods. and it's looking to promote active citizenship and social inclusion through the arts, especially among young people. Activities that nurture talents and foster entrepreneurship, including social entrepreneurship in the cultural and creative domains. Again, it's looking for learning tools, resources, materials, courses, training modules that foster creativity, culture, and multiculturalism, and our artistic and cultural initiatives with an educational dimension are aimed at raising awareness on societal issues and European matters through various artistic mediums like theatre, music performance, etc. And activities that reinforce networks and new collaboration models, notably through virtual means that stimulate intercultural engagement and flourishing of creative mindsets among citizens, in particular young people. Again, transnational mobility activities that promote learning opportunities in creative spaces and cultural heritage sites. And this has been a priority in the current programme, the programme call, and in previous years as well, where it's sought to promote European heritage and cultural spaces as places of learning, and including creative residencies for artists and creators in the fields of non-formal and formal education and youth work. And we've given the particular link there in relation to culture around the coronavirus response. So I suppose really just take a look at whichever call it is that you're responding to, and to, I suppose, there's a lot of overlap in terms of the language there and the emphasis, but you just need to be clear about what it is that your project is trying to address, and how it links in with the call and how it relates to the field under which you're applying.
Yeah, and again, just to reiterate that, you know, under the thematic workshops, under the webinar Wednesdays, we will be given examples of projects that address these themes, previous projects that have addressed these themes, which will hopefully help, you know, make it a bit more realistic in terms of and understandable in terms of what, you know, a project should do that's related to these themes. So great. Okay, so now we're going to take a look at the strategic partnerships. How strategic partnerships is formed and what the different aspects of the activities are. So I'll hand over to Dee for that.
Great, thanks Siobhan. So look, I'm very aware from the beginning that some people are very experienced in projects and particularly strategic partnerships. Some have some knowledge and then some have a little less knowledge. What I would say is I'm going to give an overview of what we're talking about here in relation to the calls and in general what strategic partnerships is. But I would urge everyone to reread the call, but in particular to look at more details in the programme guide, which is available on our website. And also post this event, whatever sector you hope to apply under, you can talk to either myself, Denise, or Siobhan. So just to reiterate, strategic partnerships aim to support the development, transfer and implementation of innovative practices, as well as the implementation of joint initiatives promoting cooperation, peer learning and exchange of practice at a European level. So there are two types of strategic partnerships, and again we asked people at the beginning what type of strategic partnership they're thinking of. So two types are basically those that support the exchange of good practice and then those supporting innovation. So when we talk about supporting the exchange of good practice, what we're saying is these projects allow organisations to develop and reinforce networks at a European level. It allows the organisational capacity to work at this transnational level. It helps organisations to exchange ideas, practices and methods in areas of common interest. And also under exchange good practice, they may produce small tangible outputs as a result of this exchange, so maybe a booklet or something for teachers to implement into the classroom. Those supporting innovation include all of the above with two different elements. So also they're expected to develop innovative outputs, or as some of you would have seen from the documents you've read, what they call them as intellectual outputs that are relevant and useful to the field. Projects engage in intensive dissemination and exploitation activities of the produced outputs or innovative outputs, so where they share the learning with relevant stakeholders and to the relevant people that they work with. And down further, I'll show you there is a dedicated budget for both intellectual outputs and multiplier events. So the type of activities and budget headings Just want to remind people this is a short overview of the type of activities and budget headings. We will go into more detail on the budget headings on the 12th of October at the Budget and Finance webinar. So for the strategic partner support and the exchange of good practice, there's three main areas that you usually can focus on. And they are project management and implementation, what we call transnational project meetings, and transnational learning, teaching and training activities. There's also an area that you can apply for exceptional costs in relation to your project. Again, we won't go into much detail on those here, but they will be covered in the Budget and Finance webinar. So when we talk about project management and implementation, we're basically talking about the general management of a project. So from planning to coordination to communication between partners. We're also talking about maybe producing some small scale outputs in relation to your project, and also how to share the learning and knowledge with stakeholders and other relevant people. So you may have information sessions, promotion and dissemination activities. You may produce brochures or leaflets or produce a small project website in support of your project. You can also carry out virtual cooperation and local project activities. And just for your information, if you were the coordinator of a project, the person who has submitted the application, that budget heading is €500 per month, depending on the duration of your project. And again, each partner gets €250 per month to cover those areas under project management and implementation. The next activity that strategic partnerships do include is basically what we call transnational project meetings. These meetings are basically between the partners of the partnership to ensure that the project runs the way it should run. So basically the aim of the meetings is to discuss the project with your partners. It's usually hosted by one of the partners in the participating countries. And there's no minimum or maximum duration of how many days you should have for this. So basically, typically, you know, an example of an 18-month project, maybe with 3 partners, for example, the first transnational project meeting could be the kickoff meeting to reiterate the aims, objectives, setting out who's responsible for that. The second meeting might be just a meeting to see how the project is going halfway. And at the end, you can have another meeting to kind of the final evaluation of how the project went. And the funding rules there is where the participants get travel, subsistence and accommodation to attend those meetings.
There's a question there just around how they work at the moment in terms of projects at the moment. So I suppose
how transnational project meetings work.
Yeah, so that how projects are, they're currently really managing theirs online at the moment, doing virtual.
Yes, yeah, I'm going to allude that in a second. At the moment, yes, you're correct there. And I do have a slide at the end about virtual meetings. So I will cover it there. But yes, a lot of people are doing those virtually, be it by Zoom, Skype, Teams, whatever method is they want to do. In the schools field, sometimes they do that virtually by e-twinning. But I do have a slide at the end of when you design your project going forward for this deadline to keep in mind virtually how those things may take place. And then the last budget heading there, or activity heading, is where projects can apply to do transnational learning, teaching and training events. And these can take part in a number of different ways. And again, there's a huge amount of detail in the program guide about this. So where again, you can have the blended mobility of learners, you can have short-term staff training events, or you can have long-term teaching and training assignments. And under the blended mobility of learners, this is where you'd have a physical mobility of getting together in whatever the aims, objectives of your project are, but also you could use the virtual mobility that may help you to prepare and support, or in these current times, maybe the only way of doing a blended mobility at the moment, to consider how to do virtual mobility. And again, the virtual mobility could be, for example, video conferencing, message forums, social media, whatever it is. This is something we've all got very savvy with over the past few months. So it's just consider that virtual mobility again in your projects, but that's what the blended mobility of learners is there, the physical and the virtual mobility. And then the short-term staff training events, which needs to be a minimum of 3 days up to a maximum of 60. So basically where this involves staff from the participating partner organisations in short-term trainings, depending on what your aims, objectives of your project are. And it must involve participants from the different countries in the partnership. And you can have various formats. It can be study visits, it can be workshops and/or training courses. And then just the 2 additional activities under strategic partner support and innovation. As you can see, they have the first 3 there as well, the same exchange of practice. The main difference here is the intellectual outputs and the multiplier events. So basically, when you hear the word intellectual output, what are we talking about? We're basically talking about something that's very tangible, substantial, deliverable, that supports the overall aims and objectives of your project. So for example, it could be a course, it could be an IT tool, it could be curricula, it could be methodology, whatever it is that you want to make to your aims, objectives of your project, what your intellectual output is. And it can also be used by others in the field of youth education and training. And for this, there is a dedicated budget that does require staff time for its development. And under multiplier events, so this is where basically we encourage all projects, particularly those with innovation as they get a budget towards it, to look at doing national and transnational events to share and disseminate the intellectual outputs of your project to your relevant stakeholders, etc. Funding is for national and international participants from outside the partnership consortium only. And again, it can take the format of a number of different methods. It can be a final conference, a thematic seminar, a roundtable discussion forum, or CPD workshops. And again, just in relation to the budget, it will be covered in detail on the 12th of October. So just, yes, Denise, you mentioned there about people talking about virtually looking at things. So basically what we're saying is, when you're doing your application, please do consider the risk for COVID-19 and how maybe you will implement your activities virtually. So basically, you'll need to think about doing your transnational meetings virtually at certain stages and cover this in your application form. You may need to do some of your planned learning, teaching, training events virtually. How this might be done, for example, virtual and then maybe hopefully face-to-face later on. If you wish to apply for multiplier events, make sure you plan again for these virtually versions of this and what they might look like. And also talk to your partners. Think about how you would work now and apply those tools, and maybe how your contingency plan for COVID-19 going into the future. So I suppose the thing is to look at risk, under risk, do look at all these areas of COVID-19. And then just, this is actually mentioned in the call that was publicised at the end of August. We are saying, look at virtual cooperation opportunities are key to successful partnerships in the COVID-19 context. And in particular, projects in the field of school education and adult education are strongly encouraged to use the eTwinning, School Education Gateway, and the Yapali platforms to work both before, during, and after the project duration. And as Siobhan has already said, if you're not aware of these platforms, we will be sending this presentation out to you afterwards, where you'll see the links there that you can go into get more information on those. So that is it, guys. As I said, I would definitely have a look at the programme guide to get further information. It's a very quick overview of strategic partnerships.
Okay, thanks very much, Dee. So now, as I mentioned earlier, in the quality criteria, there's 4 quality criteria, and you can view all of those quality criteria in the programme guide, which you should have a copy of, and you can access on the website as well. Again, as we mentioned earlier, it's very important to read all the aspects of that of the call, which covers the quality criteria in detail. The one we're going to look at it in a bit more detail is the relevance quality criteria, and it's the first one that an evaluator is going to review, and Denise is going to cover a number of aspects of that. Then we're really covering all aspects of the quality criteria, because the next quality criteria is about project design, and I'm going to cover a section on that at the end. It's on your partners, so I'm going to talk about the people as well, and then it's on impact is the last quality criteria, and there's a separate video for you to watch on impact, which our colleague has recorded specifically for this workshop. So I'm going to hand over to Denise now and to look at the relevance aspect of strategic partnership project.
Thanks, Siobhan. Okay, so as Siobhan was saying, we're covering basically the award criteria, the focus being the first being the relevance criteria. And this is where you situate your project under the theme of the call, whether it's digital readiness or creativity. You situate your project in terms of the field under which you're applying, and then you connect the need for your project to the field you're applying and the theme of the call. So all of these things are interrelated. So in a lot of applications that would come in, some weak needs analysis, and this is something that the evaluator must evaluate applications that and show that and evaluate whether or not they have a solid analysis drawing on their existing knowledge. And what we mean here is the existing knowledge in your organizations, your know-how and your practice and the needs of the target group and the organizations that you want to work with during the project. So it's very much contextualizing your organization and your project and your partners all together in terms of the project and the need for the project. So the needs identified need to be clear in terms of the field and clearly linked to the aims of this call, which is whether digital readiness or creativity, and that it's clear that the project has situated this clearly and that the needs are clear and substantiated. So I suppose for us in our experience with people doing a needs analysis, they can focus very much in the macro space. So drawing from maybe policy documents or research or other sources of information that would be very much maybe removed or from the organizations themselves. And while this has a place, we really want projects to think about the micro. So thinking about contextualizing your organizations, where you see the need for the project. How do you know about this need? How can you evidence it? And also in terms of project proposals, there can be, when you're a coordinator, a tendency to tell the Irish story. So, and maybe the less of the transnational story. What we're saying to people is to really be careful about evidencing the need across the consortium, that you reflect all of your partners in thinking about the need for your project, and you represent this in your proposal, you write it in the proposal. So I suppose the putting together the application is a collaborative exercise. So it's not just the coordinator obviously is leading the process, but really make sure that each of the partners can help you out in terms of evidencing the need for the project from their perspective. So it's balancing that transnational and national picture. So in terms of evidencing needs, this is normally an exercise we'd be doing with flip charts and lots of group work, and people would be working together. So what we're going to get you to do is do a little reflection exercise here, but thinking about what is the gap or need that your project is trying to address in terms of themes. How can you demonstrate or evidence in your application that this gap or need exists? What a source of information will you use to do this? Where will you find this out, and where will your partners find this out? And how will you ensure that all of the partners are reflected in this evidencing of needs? So if you just go to this next slide there, Siobhan, we're just going to take a little break. So what I want you to do is just to take out a piece of paper and look at the questions that I have here and try and answer them just in bullet points for the moment, and thinking about your sources of information. Where are you going to get them? Is it going in the micro level, the macro level, and your transnational representation? And then it's now 11 o'clock. Well, it could be 11 o'clock on my computer. It's 10:56. So if we come back at about 7 minutes past 11, is that about right, Siobhan?
Yeah. So we'll say, yeah, it's just after 5 to now. So shall we say 5 past?
5 past, yeah. So just give people a chance and get your piece of paper and your pen and just look at these. And the clearer that you answer these for yourself, it will impact on other aspects of your application, particularly the impact section. It can help you write that more clearly. And thinking about, I suppose, your to-do list between now and the deadline, you're going to have to try and source your evidence with your partners. And also to say that in evidencing need, it needs proportional to the size of the project. So if you're doing a small exchange of practice project, you may be looking for more local evidence, and then for a larger project where you're looking for large amounts of funding to develop intellectual outputs, for example, you'd have to have more substantial needs analysis done in relation to those intellectual outputs. So we'll just take a break for 10 minutes now, and if we come back, then we can feed back to the Jam board and see what we come up with. Is that okay?
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
Okay, are people back, or can we see?
Yeah, so I think we can.
Yeah, I can go again.
Okay. So if people want to unmute their mics, if they want to share about how they found that exercise, was it useful? And what I'm going to do is share my screen with our Jam board and just have a chat about what it means to actually to think about your evidencing your needs for your project. So these are kind of some examples that came from another group that I was working with a week or so ago. And I've just included some of them just to start us off, and maybe just a little bit of feedback around it, that the micro piece comes from the local and the organizational. There are things that already exist in your organization, you have to source them. And also, maybe if you're doing a bigger piece of work, you might have to tailor a piece of work to research for need. But a lot of, in terms of your idea for your project, you should be able to put your hand on existing reports or outcomes from meetings or a local area knowledge or evaluations that you might know that you have. So if anybody wants to add to that, and we can just add another sticky here, that would be great. Any ideas on the micro? Okay, so I suppose in terms of this, there's a little bit of organization to kind of talk to your partners. You're not going to have exactly the same kind of evidencing across the partnership. You're going to have to try and come out with similar, I suppose, sources of information which will point to the need for the project. So you might have an evaluation in one organization that's very specific, and another organization, and we'd be drawing the information from other types of information. So, but it's just to make sure that at a micro level that this information is, that it's real and it's in the context of the organization and the groups that they're working with, and that it relates to the field under which you're applying and the theme of your call. So all of these things link together.
Yeah, and I think also, Denise, in the context of COVID-19, over the last few months, if there's been discussions or any sort of feedback on particular aspects or difficulties that target groups have been experiencing, if organizations have some way maybe to show this or evidence this feedback, could be a good contribution to the application in terms of evidencing needs.
Yeah, I mean, I think particularly for the digital call, there has been such a learning curve for everybody, and for educational organizations, pressure has been massive to try and in a very short period of time move to the online learning space. And there has been a lot of reflection on that, and I know that that's very active at the moment. So people will have to be able to kind of capture that in some way. Donal, is it you want to add there?
Denise, David, hi everyone.
Oh, Dahi, sorry.
Just as a matter of interest, something that we have found in Dublin West and ourselves that has been specifically at a micro level. What we found is that during COVID, there's been a huge amount of research, even indeed massive amount of papers being written in Ireland delivered by the various, by academia and in Europe on the role of children and teachers and what digital readiness or lack of same has been evident, or what innovations have come in that whole area. But we believe that there's a very specific area which has not been looked at, and in a micro level, that is that while the teachers have been online and providing the best quality of blended learning, and indeed synchronous and asynchronous learning, indeed the parents themselves have been in a situation very often of non-readiness. So what we think is something which is a common trend at micro level and at macro level, where there is very little evidence from a literature point of view, but there's a dire need for same from a digital readiness perspective, is the actual criteria and the ways that we should approach the sense of the tridium, which is teacher, student, and parent, because if we go into a second wave, that's an area. So without saying too much from a micro and the macro level, to us, that's something which has become extremely evident, and something from a digital readiness perspective is imperative. And if Maureen wants to come in on that, it's something that we believe firmly that from down to the smallest school at a micro level, of which we've been working at for the last 6 months, to the macro level of looking at some other European countries, there is a dire need right now from digital readiness, because if we do go into, and indeed many countries are going into a second wave, it was, I say this carefully, it was easier the first time. It's going to be a hell of a lot harder the second time, and to have parents at a readiness, because the children are always going to be ready or not, and the teachers are always going to be professionally ready. And indeed, with Commissioner Gabriel launching the Digital Education Action Plan at the end of September, which is now bringing out the other criteria to look at that, and that readiness for digitization, digital readiness on that tridium. So that's something that, if that's of any help, that's where we're looking.
That's really interesting, because it's where the micro is speaking to the macro, rather than the macro speaking to the micro, and it's happening so now. And I think
follow up on what Dahi said, with our discussions with our partners, they've had a lot of the same problems that we had around the digital divide, where the competence of parents, particularly in disadvantaged areas, with the lack of devices for children, and also a focus on pedagogy. The pedagogy of online teaching was a huge piece for them, but also they were all very interested in our idea around parents, because it was something a lot of them hadn't thought of, that the digital competence of the parent and the support that the child would have at home in an online learning situation could be vital, especially when it comes to the introduction of new learning, that the parent would have a role at that. And I suppose for us in Ireland, it's in our constitution that the parent is the primary educator of the child, and sometimes we forget about that, we don't focus on it. So we've spoken to National Parents Council Primary as well, to see would they be in an associated body with us, and they're very happy to cooperate with us on it.
Yeah, can I come in here, please?
Linking as well, you taking those micro and macro researches that have come out over the last number of months and experiences, and linking that in then at a transnational level. And have you got partners who have shared the same, who've had the same problems? Perhaps some of them actually have solutions or suggested solutions that they can exchange. It's about linking the micro and the macro, and then bringing that to the transnational level, and that's how these projects will support the needs of your target groups.
Sorry, I just noticed that Karen has her hand up.
As well.
I think just picking up on those points, I think consistency of approach is very important, because I think there has been a lack of consistency as a parent of 4 and continuing to work full time. Even during lockdown, we were working from home. Time is really, it's very difficult to get the balance between you being online and the kids being online, and different approaches from different teachers, like radically different approaches. So I think whatever, anybody that can build in that kind of family friendly, or that balance and consistency would be really important in any project, I think.
Yeah.
Thanks for that. Maeve is there as well, wants to say something.
Hi everybody, I'm Maeve O'Shea. I work with the Everyman Theatre in Cork. I'm also a creative associate with the Arts Council, and since last year. I'm brand new to Erasmus Plus, so I would Dahi and Maureen, what organisation are you with? I'm sorry, I missed that
With
part.
Dublin West Education Centre. You'd have an education centre in Cork as well, Cork Education Support Centre. Down there across from the gates of UCC. We're one of a network of 21 full-time education centres around the country who provide CPD for teachers. But we would also work with parents, and we would also work with children. I suppose are, as I said, there were 21 of us around the country, but Dublin West has had a certain level of involvement in European projects before, some of which we've been very successful with, and we're hoping to engage in this call now again.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I'm a teacher by profession, so I know Cork ETP.
It's not the ETP. It's
not the one across from the Learning Support Centre, is it?
Sorry.
Okay, perfect.
It's the Education Support Centre.
Education Support Centre.
Yeah, all of them around the country except Cork are called education centres, but the Education Act actually says Education Support Centre. So Cork Education Support Centre are across the road from the gates of UCC. Yeah, and there is a new director there, a gentleman called Sean Horgan is the director there now, just appointed.
Very good. Just to say, just in support of what you were saying about the digital divide, I work with one of my creative schools. Is a school called St. Vincent's National School. It's a deaf school on the north side of Cork City. We ran we put together this beautiful project to do with graffiti to devise a script and then to film it. And we came up against the school had to. Everybody went home, as you know. So we set up online classroom activities that the kids could then bring in to their home place. And the digital divide became very, very apparent very quickly, actually. And that it wasn't just about the equipment that was available to the kids, although that was certainly an issue, because it was also about as you said, the parents' ability to manage the different levels of communication. So, for example, filming a little piece at home for submission through a particular email became something that was just a step too far for everybody. In that, so sometimes the email went to the wrong email address or went to the info@ email address and all those sort of, and then because it wasn't being reinforced successfully, then there was a huge drop off in terms of engagement with the project. So what we've done is now we're lucky in that we have all these resources available. We're going to run them out in the classroom through Zoom, but it was, if you're looking for a very specific example of where the resources were there, the goodwill was there, but there was a gap between what we were providing and what parents and students could respond to. It's a very solid example.
Okay, so
thank you.
It's great to have the support for project ideas as well.
Yeah, and also potentially across sectoral when you hear.
Yeah, I was just thinking that.
And parents and schools. So in this case, for example, if you were bringing in, say, the ETP and reaching parents that way, greatest emphasis here would be in the school, because you're talking about school education, but you're also bringing the parents in. So that's how a cross-sectoral, for example, could be. But I think it's really nice about what you're saying here. It's the storytelling of how you've come to the need for your project, and that's really vivid when the evaluator is reading it. They can really see how the partners come together, they're sharing on their experiences, and they want to address an issue, whatever that might be, and in this case, the digital divide, and that's clear, and it really makes sense in terms of the proposal. So I suppose I'll just hand...
that leads nicely onto the project section, I think.
All right, I'll stop my share now.
Okay. Okay, can you see that okay, guys?
Yeah.
Great. So yeah, as I said, that kind of leads us nicely onto the project design, because what the next aspect I want to cover is really about, it's going to address that quality criteria of project design, and which is the second quality criteria, but also in designing your project, also looking at the people involved in it as well, and the impact. So this next section is going to cover three the next three of the quality criteria that you need to address when you're submitting your Erasmus Plus application. And also to say, just based on some of those discussions that you were having there will be some opportunities as well for sharing in the webinars as well, that were thematic webinars that we're organizing on specific project themes, such as the two main themes, digital and creativity. Yeah, so there'll be opportunities there as well. So just to think about designing your project, I've kind of broken it down into 4 steps, which we're going to look at, and then at the end, just a few tips and recommendations in writing your application. So the 4 steps that I've highlighted in relation to project design are the needs, which we talked a little bit about, and which I'll just look at in a little bit more detail. Step 2 is the aims, objectives, activities, or the storytelling part of it. Step 3 is the people, and step 4 is the outcomes and impact. And then throughout, across all of these steps, you're thinking about your project management and quality management of your project and your partnership. So in relation to needs, we've talked about how to evidence the needs. But in relation to actually thinking about the needs of your project and what are the needs of your project and how will you describe them, your needs, there's different methodologies you can use in working out how the project will meet the needs of your organization and those of your target groups. So one methodology is the SWOT analysis, and that's looking at the strengths, weaknesses, and opportunities and threats maybe facing your organization or your target group. But the one we're going to look at in a little bit more detail this morning is problem tree analysis. So what I'm trying to do throughout the project design is take one example of a project and carry that through the project design, so that will help you see how the different aspects of project design will apply to a particular project on a particular theme. So I've chosen digital technology as the theme. So in terms of the problem tree, you need to think about, well, what is the issue that we have to deal with? And the issue then is at the center of the tree. So the issue in this example is that digital technology within our college is not being used to its full potential. So that then leads to think about, well, what is causing that and what are the direct effects and the indirect effects? So that's what the problem tree lays out. So for example, the teachers haven't been trained to use it correctly. Student engagement then could be a direct effect of that digital technology not being used to its full potential, or student grades are not improving. That would be another effect, or an indirect effect, maybe a longer term effect. So thinking about the different effects and issues and effects then of with your target group or within your organization. And then thinking about the solutions to those when designing your project. So the solution then is that you want to use digital technology to full potential. The objectives then are, well, we need to work out how to discover methods to use it effectively. We might look at reviewing methodologies that other partners are using. And then we might want to develop a training program to address the issue that we have. And then that'll help you design your outputs. So your outputs and all of that might be a new training portal and a training program. And then the results of that. The results will be then that students will be more engaged and motivated, and teachers will also be able to deal with different learning styles, and then student grades will improve. That will be the longer term impact, and also dropout rates for disadvantaged students. So there is a direct link there then between the problem tree, so the causes and then the effects, and then if you go back into the solution tree, the objectives and the results and the impact. And those are all linked. So for example, your direct effect of your problem is that students are not engaging, and then you link back in to results. And by designing this and by working with partners and developing outputs, then the result is that students will become more engaged. So there's links between the problem tree and the solution tree. That's just one methodology that you might want to use in designing your project. So then the second step in designing your project is about telling the story. And it's trying to really engage whoever's reading your project in what are you aiming to do? And also it's the how. What activities will you undertake in order to be able to reach your objectives? So in relation to the aims, it's important to say that an aim has an overall purpose, and they also tend to be longer range. What do you hope to achieve in the end? In our project management days, we do a little newspaper headline exercise where our projects, they think about what their newspaper headline will be at the end of the project. You know, like, what is your overall aim and what do you want to achieve? What do you want to advertise to people, and what do you want to stay, what do you want to stand out? What do you want to, the evaluator to really understand what your overall objective is in the end and what you hope to achieve. So like a bad example of writing an aim would be, we'll strive to use digital technology within our school to its full potential. Why is it a bad example? Because it's a little bit vague. You want somebody to read your aim and understand exactly what your overall hopes are by the end of the project. So I've given us a good example for this digital technology project to use using a shared practice approach. We're going to develop a staff training portal and train 30 staff members across 5 countries in the effective use of digital technologies. So that's not vague, it's very clear what you want to achieve. And anybody reading that will understand exactly what you want to achieve in the course of your project. So then you, once you've developed your overall aim, you need to then break that down into objectives. And your objectives have to be linked to the overall aim. They have to be concrete targets. And effectively, they are steps to achieve the aim. And they tend to be shorter term and also measurable. So for example, in this case, an example of objectives might be to share tools and approaches used across the partnership, remembering this is a transnational project, review methodologies for using the technology, develop a training program and portal for the staff, then train 30 staff members, and then roll out the portal and training to a wider staff cohort and regional colleges. So those are essentially the targets and the goals in order to achieve your overall aim. And you can see that in many ways they will help you achieve the overall aim if you are able to undertake all of those steps. And then activities are very important. And earlier Dee went through the activities, the types of activities that you can undertake in a strategic management, a strategic partnership project. Such as your project management, which is central to any project of this type, your transnational learning, teaching, training activities, transnational project meetings, and intellectual outputs or multiplier events if you choose to do innovation project. So your activities are really the how you're going to achieve your aims and objectives. And each objective really should have an activity or several activities linked to it. And that's the way you should be thinking about when you're designing your project. And I'll give you an example of that. So these are all of the objectives that were outlined in the previous slide on objectives. And what I've done is I've linked then particular activities to those objectives to show how can we actually achieve that objective. So for example, if we look at objective 1, sharing tools and approaches used across the partnership, that's the first step in your project to achieve your aims. And how can you do that? You could do that by organising a short-term staff training activity for your partners, and that would be an opportunity to share and train each other on different methodologies. So, to share and to understand the different methodologies across the partnership. But you don't have to do that at a short-term training activity. You could do that, for example, as part of a transnational partner meeting. It depends what way you want to approach that. But the important thing is that you have to have some activity linked to your objectives. And then if we look at the developing a training program and portal for staff, then the activities there are going to be your outputs. So developing, the activity is the development of the output, the training program and guidelines, and the training portal and resources. And they will feed into that objective then of developing a training portal. And then the last objective was roll out the portal and training to wider staff cohort and regional colleges. And you could do this through multiplier events, a type of activity. And it's just a matter then of really piecing it all together and making sure that your activities make sense in relation to your objectives. So there's no point in having a short-term staff training activity if that's not going to be able to link to your overall aim or objectives. And then, as I said, one of the quality criteria is about your partnership, and that involves the people also and the participants overall that are involved in your project. So thinking about your project partners, who will you work with to achieve the shared aims? And it's very important that they are shared aims, that the needs that you've outlined are central to all of the partners, and that all of the partners can benefit from the activities of the project. And you need to think about your partners. Who are they going to be, and what skills do they have that they can bring to the project? You also need to think about your target group in terms of people. So who will benefit from the final results or outcomes? And that might be your partners, but it might be broader than that as well. And it might be, for example, the students that are part of your organization, the learners who can benefit from the outputs, but they mightn't be, you know, actively part of the everyday life of the project. And you need to think about the wider cohort of people as well. For example, there might be people involved throughout the project, so other staff within your organization or your partner organizations, associated partners. You could have maybe an external evaluator involved, or other external stakeholders, or even policymakers who might need to feed into your project at certain parts of the project. So you're really thinking of your people involved from start to finish of the project, and who needs to be involved right throughout the project. And also, when we come to the impact section, also beyond the project. So who will your project appeal to in the longer term as well, not just when it finishes after the 24 months, but after the end of the project. You want other target groups and participants and people to be able to benefit from the results well beyond the lifetime of the project. So the last step then is really about your outcomes and impact. And this is really, this is the last quality criteria, your impact and dissemination. It's the last quality criteria of a strategic partnership project, but it's by no means the least important. In fact, it attracts 30 points of a total 100 points available to the assessment of a strategic partnerships project. So it's very important aspect of your project, and for that reason, because we don't have enough time you know, at our session today to go into that in detail, our impact officer Karis Hughes and the manager of our communication section, she has put up a video on YouTube for you to view. It's about 25-30 minutes long, but it's really worth viewing because it'll take you through the impact aspect of the strategic partnerships application and allow you to be able to understand how the outcomes of your project are linked to the impact and really is an important part of that project design. So I would encourage you to do that as soon as possible after this application session. And really, to pull it all together, on my first slide I talked about the 4 steps, but also the project and quality management of the application, how you really need to think about how you're going to describe your project management. There's lots of different sections within the application form where you have to describe how you're going to manage your project. And as a result of a previous conference that we organised in 2019, we have developed a book called Myth Busting, European Project Management and Transnational Partnership Projects. That's available on our website and on the link that's in the slide. And you can download that. And there's lots of tips and tools in relation to project management and quality management for your strategic partnership project, which again, I would encourage you to incorporate into your application, because it's important to be specific in these applications and make sure that the evaluator knows just exactly what your plans are and how you're going to roll that out. Okay, so just to close then this section on project design, a few tips and recommendations for writing your application. So what makes a good quality project? Well, as we've already discussed, needs identification is very important. So looking at the gaps and identifying the problems that face your sector or face your organization. And those need to be linked then together. So the gaps in the sector need to be linked to the needs and aims of your organization and also those of your partners. Also, providing high quality outputs that can be used outside the partnership is also something that an evaluator is looking for in an application. So it needs to be clear when you're describing your project outputs that you've thought about what they're going to look like, and that it can show an evaluator that these really are going to be of high quality and they're going to be very useful to stakeholders within the partnership, but also outside the partnership. You need to focus on a clearly identified target group. Sometimes projects can try to think about too many different target groups, you know, students, teachers, policymakers, and while you want all of those to be involved in your project, you really need to identify who are they going to be the end users of your project, whether that be results in terms of knowledge sharing or actual outputs that you're developing. So make sure that your target group is clearly identified and that the evaluator or anybody who's reading the application will know, oh, I know who their target group are in this project and who they want to address in relation to the needs. And also think about dissemination through relevant networks, you know, and the important word there is relevant. So your dissemination plan that you outline in your application needs to be quite specific, and you need to identify the networks that you're hoping to disseminate to. And then finally, a few tips. Just make sure that when you're applying and you're filling in your application that you join the dots and that all of the aspects of the application link together, and that you're not saying one thing in part of the application that contradicts something else in another part of the application. Use plain English and be concise. Rambling text is not very easy to read. It doesn't hold the attention of the person that's reading it. So it's really good to be concise and use very plain language. So make sure you give equal attention to all sections of the application. And I spoke about that earlier. You tend to talk about the needs and the relevance first of all in the application. And then sometimes when applicants get to the end of the application, when they're talking about the impact, you know, it kind of runs out of steam a little bit, which is understandable, but it's very important to realize that the relevance and the impact section attract the same number of points in the application. So do be aware of, in the evaluation, so do be aware of that. Get someone else to go through your application. It's good to have a critical friend, if you like, read through your application and see if they understand it. Because obviously sometimes it's very clear to you what you're saying, but not clear to somebody who's reading it. And probably one of the most important tips is please don't leave it to the last minute to hit submit. These are online applications. So, you know, you can work on them as you go along. And again, we'll show you that in the budget workshop, but don't leave it to the last minute to hit submit. You should really be looking at submitting no later than the day before, because what tends to happen is the traffic tends to get very high as it gets closer to the deadline, and people then can run into technical problems, etc. Because they're leaving it to the last minute. So that's very important tip. So just to finish off then, a few reminders of things that we've already covered, but just are very important. So we just want to go back to it again. And that's just to say that we are having further workshops. I hope that you've gotten a good range of information from this workshop. But as we said at the start, there are a number of other sessions that we would encourage you to sign up for if you haven't already done so. Depending on the theme of your application, we have our webinar Wednesdays, one on digital education and one on creativity for change. We have our budget and finance workshop on the 12th of October, which is it doesn't have a time there actually, but it's going to be the morning again. And then we have that open house on the 22nd of October. So you can sign up to all of those through that link. And very importantly, just a reminder that the deadline is the 29th of October at 11 a.m. Irish time. So that's really all. And just if you want to contact us individually, you can do that. We have our contact details here, and you can see our email addresses and which fields that we look after. So I don't know if there's any more questions on the chat that we need to.
There was just one question there, Siobhan, about is staff cost eligible? Right, can I check if the staff cost is eligible? And just to reiterate the partnering platforms, just on the partnering platforms for school sector or partnering, I beg your pardon, it is eTwinning and School Education Gateway. And for APALE, or sorry, for Adult Ed, it's APALE, and Denise, for youth, there's Salto, isn't there?
There's Salto, yeah, and I can put the link in the chat there.
Great. And then just the other thing onto the budget heading, Denise just includes there, that'll be covered off in the budget and finance workshop.
Yeah, and just I suppose there's four main categories for intellectual outputs. We have researcher, technician, administration and manager. They're kind of broad staff categories, and then it just depends on your project. So we need to talk to you a little bit more about that, Vance, in relation to your question there, to give you a better answer on that one. Because
yeah, I mean, that's going to be covered in detail at the budget.
Yeah,
as well. So all of the aspects of the budget, and what exactly you can apply for in relation to the budget. But yeah, staff costs are eligible, but only under intellectual outputs. Everything else is unit costs, which are set for each of the other types of activities. So yes, staff costs are eligible, but only under the intellectual outputs type of activity. So if you're developing an output, you can have staff time towards that. But yeah, it will be covered in detail at the budget workshop.
And sorry, somebody just highlighted there that we already know this is also an accreditation deadline on the same day, but hey, nothing we can do about that.
The joys of European
joys.
Yeah, and just bear in mind again, just to reiterate that this is it's just an additional call for very specific themes. Unfortunately there is a limited funding available for this call, so obviously we'll only be able to select the very, very best quality applications that are relevant, extremely relevant to the themes, and just to bear that in mind. But there will be additional funding in the first call of the new programme, which will kick off early 2021, and which will be much broader as well in terms of the themes the projects will be able to address.
And sorry, yes, Gordon, you should contact the HEA for higher education students.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes there's that little bit of confusion over vocational education training and higher education, but it's important that if you're targeting higher education students in your application, that's where it comes back to that target group again that we talked about earlier on, that if you're targeting third level students as in your application, then it needs to be submitted under higher education. Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Okay, so again, I hope everybody found that useful. We have recorded the session, so we will try to make that available as soon as possible. And also we will send out a copy of the presentation and a copy of the call document following this session. And just a reminder to sign up for any of the other sessions that may be of interest to you before the deadline on the 29th of October. And then you have our contact details there on the screen as well. Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks,
guys.
Bye, everybody.
Very much.
Good luck. Bye.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Have a great day, everybody.